Hey friend, in today's watercolor tutorial, I'm going to be teaching step by step how to paint a watercolor redwood tree. Without further ado, let's get painting. Today's tutorial, I'm using burnt umber, sap green, Perylene Green, Venetian Red, and VanDyke Brown. I am also going to be using a size 6, size 8, and size 2 round Princeton brush. And I'm mixing it up today. I have a 9x12 sheet of watercolor paper. So redwoods are rather large, and so it's really helpful to have a slightly larger piece of paper for this tutorial. To get started, I am going to start with some of my burnt umber, and I'm gonna lay out the tree trunk first. So I'm just gonna do a really watered down light sketch starting in the center of the page. I'm just gonna start with a very faint brown line. And next, I am going to start to sketch out the layout of our trunk. So I kind of want to widen this area here towards its base. I'm gonna keep the bottom kind of loose, slightly irregular and jagged. And then from here, I'm just gonna elongate this a little bit more. And then next, I'm gonna leave an opening right on the side here because I do want some greenery to slightly overlap. So just to be mindful of that, I'm sketching this kind of awkward reverse C shape here, just as a little reminder once I get to painting. Then I'm just gonna elongate this brown area and then start to do a little bit of another little C shape here. And that's actually a normal C shape. That is not a reverse C shape. This one is. Anyway, so I'm gonna have some greenery overlap there. I may have a little bit overlap here as well. So I'm just kind of like loosely marking that off. I'm gonna go ahead and connect this area here. So this is just kind of a foundational, really loose, simple sketch. All right, so I'm just carrying forth with this. And then from here, I'm going to have a lot of greenery showing. So I'm marking this off. And then I'm gonna have just a little dash of brown showing up here. But then I'm just gonna mark this area off as well. Before I do anything else, I'm going to take some water and just loosely lift some of the watery brown we did before just by applying a lot of pressure on my brush and going back and forth with some water. It's okay if there's a subtle pigment of brown in the background. The green will overlap on that really nicely. And then I'm just going to kind of do the same thing up top where there is this kind of stick of brown. I just want to loosen that up. And again, water and lots of pressure going back and forth with your brush will kind of lift it. So I would like to start with our greenery first. We will overlap some brown branches on the greenery once the greenery is dry. But to begin with the greenery, I am going to start with a really light amount of sap green, and I want to begin just by kind of tapping it out really loosely. I'm using the belly of my brush here, so the side, not the tip, and just doing really loose brush strokes, very irregular. This is our first little bit of greenery here. And I'm starting with this watered down sap green because we can always build it later. Off slightly up towards, maybe just slightly more up, I'm gonna do some greenery kind of over, kind of underlapping, if you will, just behind the trunk and kind of peeping through. And I'm allowing some white to pop through the greenery. I don't want it to be like just a big block, if you will. of the Sap Green. I want some variegation in that. Alrighty, and then next I'm just gonna do a little bit more kind of underlapped here. Again, just using this really light texture, this almost tapping like texture, if you will. Maybe this area here has a little bit of a gap, but then kind of overlaps on the tree off towards the left, just above here. Okay, and next I have this nice full area just above, and I'm going to start to broaden the tree a little bit off towards the left. I'm going to get just a little bit more paint. Alrighty. And next I am just going to continue up. This one's going to be kind of underlap behind the tree, this little branch here. And again, I'm just loosely tapping with irregular edges. You could see the little bits of green kind of surrounding the foliage. So that way there's this nice uneven texture that we're carrying throughout. All right, so now I am going to really go to town with the greenery up here. This is where it's nice and full and dense with the foliage. And you can see here I've kind of connected the greenery to touch the greenery down below. All right, and then up towards the top, I'm now going to create kind of like a subtle point and then just do a loose texture on either side. Okay, now before all of our sap green dries, I want to take just a hint of our Perylene Green, which is our nice deep green. It's quite dark. I'm watering it down just a hair bit, but I just want to loosely tap in some of our Perylene Green, especially towards the bottom areas. And this is just going to give a nice shadow and contrast up against the sap green. And some areas of the sap green are slightly dry and some are wet. If you have areas that are slightly dry, you can always add a little bit more water with the sap green just to re-wet a certain area, and then go back in and add in that Perylene Green to get that kind of looser bleed here. All right, and then I'm leaving some area up towards the top, nice and vibrant with the sap green where the sun is hitting it. And last but not least, I'm actually going to use my size 2 brush this time, and I'm going to mix some sap green with a little bit of Perylene Green and with this kind of in-between color, I want to take my size 2 brush and get some really loose texture, and I'm simply just adding almost like these eyelash wispy brush strokes. I always use that word whenever I want to get finer detail and just describe it. So see how the difference between this and that? I simply just want to carry out this texture just on a few areas. It doesn't have to be around every single edge of each branch, but I just want this kind of loose, feathery redwood greenery to kind of be showcased here. So again, you don't have to do it absolutely everywhere, but I would say definitely towards the bottom of the branches, and then you can add a few just kind of popping out from the top as well. Doesn't have to be too overboard. So I'm just going to carry on that process through the rest of the tree. Alrighty, so now our greenery is nice and texturized. I want to start working on our trunk and our branches. So I'm going to start with our burnt umber, and I'm going to lay out our burnt umber throughout the whole trunk. So I'm just going to use my size 6 brush. Oh, and we got some Venetian Red in there. That's okay. I was planning on doing all burnt umber first, but I was gonna layer in some Venetian Red anyways. So you can do that now if you would like, optional. But starting with some burnt umber, and then just a little bit of Venetian Red, might as well, just to get this nice vibrant color. And I'm just keeping the trunk kind of like the base of the trunk a little irregular. I'm just going to paint along the edge here. All right, now I'm just gonna lay out some burnt umber in this gap area, and then I'm just gonna like very gingerly paint around some of the irregular edges of the greenery. It's okay if a little bit of the burnt umber kind of bleeds into the green, not a big deal. We like kind of that wet and wet look with watercolor anyway, so that's totally fine if that's happening a little bit. All right, and then I'm gonna add just a subtle touch of Venetian Red. If you don't have Venetian Red, another good substitute is a little bit of burnt sienna, or you can mix a little bit of orange or a little bit of red even into your burnt umber, either one, just to give it a little bit of a brick red tone, just slightly. We don't want it overpowered, we want mainly brown, but just a little bit of the warmth of that Venetian Red is totally fine. I'm just gonna smooth out this edge here. Here we go. And then I'm just gonna do the same thing up here, just smoothing out this edge. Alrighty. Now I'm just gonna bring our burnt umber continued up on this trunk. And then I'm just gonna loosely texturize some brown in here as well, just along the edge of the greenery. Alrighty, and then from here, I want to just get a small touch of Venetian Red and just add that right on in to the trunk. And then I'm gonna just carry on over to just fill in this little tip top of the trunk, and then just do a couple dots of the trunk popping through the greenery, just irregularly, like so. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing here, just adding a couple little dots of the trunk kind of popping through the greenery here and there. Okay. Now I want to add some shading, and I'm going to use my size 2 brush now. And our shaded color, actually switching gears, so sorry. I'm going to carry on with that Venetian Red and burnt umber, and I'm going to mix those two together for our branches. Got a little ahead of myself there. So just mixing the burnt umber and the Venetian Red, because we need some branches on this tree. Okay, so I'm going to just lay out some branches. I'm going to start by doing a slight little dash right on this right edge of the tree, and then do another couple dashes of brown right in here, maybe a small one just like that, just to show that our foliage is definitely connected. Next, I'm going to do one that's showing more off this left side and kind of angled down and slightly jagged. I may just do a smaller branch stemming off of that branch, just like that. Let's see here. I'm now going to do maybe a little dash here and then a branch kind of popping out from underneath. Just like so. And then I'm gonna add a couple dashes right here, and then maybe just one in there. We're just kind of webbing these through just so that way we can see some foliage kind of popping through and weaving through the branches. Next, I'm going to do another branch but slightly angled upward. It's almost like the letter Y, if you will. Okay, and then I'm going to do another branch off towards the left. And then I'm going to just do a branch kind of weaving through, just like a little bit of a gap here. And then a little dash right in that white area. I feel like I need another branch in here, so I'm just going to do a branch that's kind of underlapped and pointed downward, kind of popping between the white areas. And I may do another small branch just on its own without foliage off towards the left. And then one maybe just lower towards the right. Okay, now I'm going to do a couple little dashes of brown in that foliage here. Same for off towards the right. I'm adding just a couple dashes of brown in some of these white areas, just to show some connection between the branch and the greenery. And I'll do maybe one little branch kind of poking through here as well. Okay, so now we can move on to our VanDyke Brown. And I want to add the VanDyke Brown, I would say towards the right-hand side. I'm just going to start with a line laid out that's slightly thick. I'm going to go ahead and carry it on in between the foliage that kind of pops through. Okay, and now I'm just going to take a little bit more VanDyke Brown and some water and just do these really loose vertical brush strokes, kind of dragging some of that thicker VanDyke Brown from the shaded area towards the right and more into the center, being mindful to leave some gaps for the burnt umber and the Venetian Red to pop through as well. So I'm just doing these really loose, kind of jagged vertical brush strokes just to get some more texture on our tree trunk, and I'm being mindful to also carry on that texture right along the edges of where the greenery kind of pops and overlaps on the tree trunk. So I'm being sure to carry that just alongside that edge. I'm taking some more water and kind of dragging some of the VanDyke Brown up here as well. And I'll do the same thing up top. You could use a little bit more VanDyke Brown on our right edge just to make it pop with some more detail. And then I'm just texturizing some of the tree trunk here with these vertical lines. Now I'm just adding any finishing details to the texture of the trunk here. Making sure the right hand side is slightly darker than the left. All right, and then I'm gonna take just a little bit more VanDyke Brown and just outline the bottoms of some of our branches here, just to help define them and give them a little bit of shading. Okay, and the last step that I really want to do is take my size 2 brush and just take a little bit more Perylene Green, and I just want to add a little bit of a pop of some deeper color using the Perylene Green. And I don't want it to be too drastic, so I'm going to water down the Perylene Green just a hair bit. But I just want to add just a few pops of texture of the Perylene Green, just kind of blotting my size 2 brush. And then just taking water as needed just to kind of buff it out a little bit, so that way it's not too much of a contrast to the rest of the tree. But I just want to add just a few touches. Not trying to go too overboard here, but just to add some final kind of shading and dimension. Perylene Green is such a beautiful color. It's one of my top favorite colors in the Winsor Newton palette. If you don't have it, you can simply mix burnt umber, a green like sap green or olive green or hooker's green is fine, and then some blue like Prussian blue or Antwerp blue, and you will get this like nice vibrant dark blue green that's kind of earthy as well with the undertones of the brown. But I will say I found I was mixing this color up, or trying to get this kind of color just consistently with my landscapes. And then I just looked at the Winsor Newton palette, saw this color, and I was like, I feel like I have mixed this Perylene Green color, not knowing it existed, so many times. So I finally like pulled the plug and bought it, and now I cannot go back. I absolutely love it. And now I don't have to spend the time to pre-mix this color that if I had known existed before, I definitely probably would have gotten it. So definitely venture out and take a look at other colors that you maybe are mixing a lot, and whatever watercolor brand you use for paint, you can kind of just see what can save you some time depending on how often you're mixing that particular shade. I will say I do love with watercolor that you can just have a few colors and mix an endless amount of colors, so makes it more cost effective that way for sure. So either way. Just doing my finishing touches, just kind of loosely texturizing. And there we have it. Thank you so much for joining me for today's watercolor redwood tree tutorial. This definitely brings me back to some of my camping trips as a kid in Big Sur. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any further watercolor tutorials.